Stop trying to fix yourself. The Zen way to end inner conflict. Chapter 1. The soundtrack of modern disquiet. Somewhere in the theater of your mind, the performance never stops. It is a one-actor show that has been running since you were old enough to compare yourself to another. It whispers that you are perpetually behind, that your peers have mastered the art of living, while you are merely stumbling through the corridors of your own days. This voice is not merely a thought, it is an atmosphere. It is the hum of the refrigerator that you only notice when the power finally goes out. We often mistake this voice for our own. We assume that because it speaks with our cadence and our memories, it must be the voice of truth. But let us sit with a different hypothesis. What if you are the one hearing the voice, and therefore, you cannot be the voice? You are currently reading these words not as a person who needs to be fixed, but as a person who has perhaps been distracted by the sheer volume of their own internal commentary. There is no heavy lifting to be done here. There is no becoming a better person through the sheer exertion of will. There is only the subtle, quiet act of coming home to a room you have always occupied but rarely visited. History is filled with those who walked this path before you, the monks who sat in the silence of high-altitude caves, the sages who found clarity amidst the dust of the marketplace. They all hit the same wall you are facing, the wall of a mind that insists on being the captain of a ship it does not know how to steer. They discovered in their darkest, most desperate hours that the mind was never meant to be the master. It is an instrument, a finely tuned tool of analysis, but when left to run rampant, it becomes the architect of its own cage. When we speak of fixing, we imply that you are a broken object. But what if you are a process? What if your restlessness is not a sign of defect, but a sign of a natural human energy that has lost its direction? For years you have been taught to fight your own mind, to treat every anxious thought as a fire that must be extinguished. This constant combat is exhausting. It is the very thing that keeps the anxiety thriving. By trying to suppress the internal noise, you only turn up the volume. Consider the possibility that your overthinking mind is not your enemy. It is a protective, albeit misguided, guardian. It tries to worry about everything because it thinks worry is the price of safety. It criticizes you because it thinks self-flagellation is the price of improvement. It is a deeply insecure entity that is simply trying to keep you from harm. You do not need to silence it with force, you need to understand it with clarity. This journey is about a shift in posture. It is moving from a stance of war to a stance of hospitality. Imagine inviting all those loud, demanding, fearful thoughts into your parlor. Imagine offering them a chair and a cup of tea. Instead of trying to kick them out, you simply sit with them, you notice them. You see the fear underneath the critique, and in that moment of witnessing, something shifts. You realize that you are the host, not the prisoner. This is not a theoretical exercise. It is a visceral, moment-to-moment practice. When you wake up in the morning and that voice starts its inventory of your inadequacies, you can pause, you can take a breath. You can feel the weight of your own existence in the bed, the temperature of the air, the rhythmic beat of your heart. You can acknowledge the voice, but you do not have to believe the script. You are standing on the threshold of something that has been understood and practiced for over 2,500 years. It is a gentle path, a path of return. It requires no conversion, no special equipment, and no particular set of beliefs. It only requires the willingness to look at the sky of your own consciousness and realize that you are not the weather. You have spent so long running from yourself, seeking refuge in distractions, in work, in digital noise, in the hollow promises of more. But the refuge you seek has been here, under the noise beneath the thoughts, waiting for you to stop running. You have nowhere to go and nothing to become. You have only to be here with yourself, in the quiet reality of the present. Welcome to the beginning of the end of the war within. Welcome home. Chapter 2. The Browser of the Soul. Consider the physiological experience of being you in this particular slice of history. Your phone vibrates in your pocket. Before your hand has even touched the glass, your nervous system, that ancient survival-oriented engine, has already signaled a state of mild alert. You are not just living in a physical space, you are navigating a digital ecosystem designed to fragment your focus into 1,000 shards. Your mind has become an internet browser with 47 tabs open, each flickering with a different demand, a different notification, a different anxiety. We have institutionalized this fragmentation. We call it multitasking or productivity. But if we are honest, it is a low-grade war against our own presence. That voice that whispers you are not enough thrives in this state of constant dispersion. It needs the tabs to stay open so that you never have to look at the blank screen of your own being. It needs the noise to keep you from realizing that the emergency you feel is entirely self-familiared. When you feel that tightness in your jaw, that shallow, rapid rise and fall of breath, or that low-level hum of restlessness, recognize it for what it truly is. Your body trying to survive in a digital environment that treats every minor email as if it were a predator lurking in the tall grass. You are not broken. You are a biological organism living in an unnatural state, being asked to process information at the speed of light while your brain is still wired for the speed of a walking stride. To reclaim yourself is to begin the arduous, yet immensely rewarding, process of closing the tabs. Most of us have become strangers to our own minds because we have forgotten how to sit with the unstimulated self. We have learned to fear boredom the way our ancestors feared famine. We reach for our devices the moment we are left alone with our thoughts, fearing that if we stop for even a second, we will be confronted by a terrifying emptiness. But this emptiness is a deception. It is not a void, it is the natural, spacious silence that follows the departure of noise. Think of your attention as your most valuable currency. Every time you give it to a headline that induces fear, a social media feed that induces inadequacy, or a task that is merely a distraction from your deeper purpose, you are spending your life capital on things that do not pay dividends. You are feeding the engine that keeps you feeling behind. This is not a call to disconnect from the world or to discard the tools of our age. It is a call to become the master of your own digital territory. It begins with the simple realization that you have the authority to decide what enters your field of awareness. Try this. The next time you find yourself reaching for your phone during a moment of transition waiting for the elevator, standing in line, or sitting with your morning coffee pause, before you touch the screen, notice the impulse. Notice the flicker of fear that says, I must be occupied. Notice the discomfort of just being with yourself. And then, intentionally choose to let that impulse pass. Keep your hands still. Take one breath, just one, and anchor your attention into the sensations of your body. In that one moment, you are doing something revolutionary. You are choosing the reality of your own existence over the manufactured urgency of the browser tabs. You are reclaiming the sovereignty of your mind. This process of closing the tabs isn't about being perfect. It isn't about clearing your mind of all thoughts. That is a myth sold by those who want to turn meditation into another achievement to be mastered. It is about returning to the present over and over again, as many times as you are pulled away. It is about noticing when you have drifted into the future or the past, and gently, without judgment, bringing yourself back to the current breath. You will find that as you clear the mental clutter, the devil voice loses its power. It requires the chaotic background noise of 47 open tabs to shout its lies about your inadequacies. When you bring your awareness back to the simplicity of the breath, when you anchor yourself in the here and now, the voice becomes a distant, manageable sound. You are the architect of this stillness. You are the one who decides what deserves your focus. And that, in itself, is the beginning of the end of the emergency state. Chapter 3. The Hunger That Never Ends. Why is it that every time we reach the destination we were certain would save the promotion, the acquisition, the perfect partnership, the relief lasts only until the next sunset? We have built a culture upon the logic of more. We are conditioned to believe that we are fundamentally a collection of deficits, and that our only job in life is to perpetually fill the holes. If I secure this salary, the hole will be filled. If I earn this title, I will finally be safe. If I attain this status, the gnawing sense of not enough will vanish. But look at the mathematics of this desire. It is a zero-sum game, a treadmill that accelerates the faster you run. The very act of placing your happiness on the other side of an achievement reinforces the core belief that happiness is fundamentally missing right here, right now. We become like a person standing in the middle of a bountiful kitchen, convinced they are starving because they are looking for a meal that exists only in their imagination. This searching is not a sign of ambition, it is a habit of the mind. And like any habit, it can be unlearned. The goal is not to stop wanting things that would be an inhuman endeavor, for we are creatures of desire, but to stop treating your happiness as a hostage to your circumstances. We want to find a peace that is not fragile, a peace that does not shatter when the market shifts, the relationship falters, or the plan fails. Consider the last time you felt a genuine, unforced moment of contentment. It likely did not come from an external achievement. It may have been the way the light hit a wall in the afternoon, the taste of a simple meal, or the quiet presence of someone you love. In those moments, you weren't searching. You weren't trying to change your reality. You were simply inhabiting it. That is the state of enough. The cruelty of the modern hunger is that we are constantly told that enough is a synonym for stagnation. We are warned that if we stop searching for more, we will fall behind. But this is the lie of the browser tabs. In reality, when you stop the frantic outward-reaching search, you don't disappear into obscurity. You finally become present enough to see what is already here. You stop living in the not yet and start living in the now. This shift requires a radical reorientation of value. We have been taught to value ourselves based on our output, what we have done, what we have built, what we have gained. But your value as a human being is not an achievement, it is an inherent quality of your existence. You do not need to earn the right to be here, you are here. That is the starting point. When you operate from a place of already enough, your striving changes texture. You can still work hard, you can still dream big, and you can still pursue excellence. But you do so from a foundation of stability, rather than a foundation of lack. You are no longer working to fill a hole. You are working to express your life. This is the difference between an actor who is desperate for applause and a musician who is simply playing for the love of the melody. Notice the difference in your own life. When you work from the fear of not enough, every setback feels like a verdict on your worth. Every mistake feels like a catastrophe. But when you work from a place of already enough, a mistake is simply information. A setback is simply a shift in the wind. You have the emotional bandwidth to learn, to pivot, and to continue, because your internal security is not being liquidated by the external reality. The habit of searching creates the reality of searching. If you spend your life looking for the next source of completeness, you will always be a seeker, never a finder. You will always be a prisoner of your own desires, living at the mercy of circumstances, waiting for the world to grant you permission to be happy. But you do not need permission. You do not need to reach a certain threshold of success to be allowed to experience peace. The peace is in the stillness. It is in the realization that you are not a project to be finished, but a consciousness to be experienced so. Look at your current wants. Do not try to suppress them, but shine the light of awareness upon them. Ask yourself, what do I think this will give me that I don't already have? You will find, if you are honest, that you are looking for a sense of safety, a sense of belonging, or a sense of worthiness. All of those things are internal states, not external possessions. They cannot be bought and they cannot be earned. They can only be remembered. You are already in the kitchen. You have everything you need. You can stop starving. You can take a breath. Look around at the life you have already built and recognize that just for this moment it is chapter 4. The actor and the heartbreak. Let us return to the story of the young man pianist, the actor, the one who lived the double life with such precision that he eventually forgot who was standing behind the curtain. He lived in the frantic pulse of London and the neon pressure of New York, chasing a dream that he hoped would finally serve as a bulletproof vest against his own past. He believed that if he could just become someone famous, someone untouchable, someone the world would define as successful, he could finally outrun the shame that had been stitched into the lining of his childhood. He lived his life at a perpetual sprint. He burned the candle at both ends, not because he had endless energy, but because he was terrified that if he stopped moving, the silence would catch up with him. He treated his life like a high-stakes theatrical production, where the performance had to be flawless, the lines had to be delivered with perfect timing, and the audience had to be constantly enthralled. He thought that if he glowed bright enough, no one would notice the shadow he was dragging behind him. But the body has a way of staging interventions. When the mind refuses to acknowledge the limits of the ego, when his heart began to fail literally, physically, clinically, was forced into a stillness that felt like a death sentence. For the first time in his adult life, he was alone in a room with himself. He could not party. He could not act. He could not distract. The curtain had been pulled back and the stage was empty. He found himself in a Tibetan monastery in Scotland, a place he initially viewed not as a sanctuary, but as a rehab facility, a place to get the engine of his ambition repaired so he could return to the show. He arrived as a broken artifact, physically ill, emotionally shattered, and spiritually hollow. He sat on the meditation cushion with the same grim, competitive determination he had brought to his acting career. He was determined to win at meditation. He was determined to clear his mind, to reach that fabled state of enlightenment, and to prove to himself that he wasn't broken. But the silence had other plans. It stripped him of his props. It took away his audience. It refused to validate his identity as a high achiever. It simply presented him with the raw, unfiltered reality of his own consciousness, the very thing he had been running from. For over a decade, he spent years in that monastery, grappling with the same patterns you may recognize in your own life. He tried to think his way out of his suffering. He treated his trauma like a complex theatrical script that could be edited if he just found the right lines. He became obsessed with the narrative of his pain, cataloging his past, analyzing his triggers, and hoping that through sheer intellectual labor, he could solve the mystery of his own unhappiness. But the more he analyzed, the more trapped he became. He was like a man trying to smooth out the surface of a pond by hitting it with a hammer. Every strike created more ripples, more chaos, more agitation. He discovered that he had been trying to hate himself into a better version of himself. He believed that if he was just harsh enough, just disciplined enough, just critical enough, he would eventually reach a standard of perfection that would earn him the right to be at peace. It was only when he hit the absolute bottom, when he climbed the wall of the retreat center in the middle of a panic attack and stood in the rain shaking and defeated, that the shift finally occurred. He stopped asking, "How do I fix this?" and started asking, "What is actually happening?" He stopped treating his suffering as an enemy to be defeated and began to treat it as a part of himself that needed to be held. He realized that the devil voice in his head, the one that screamed at him to be better, to be thinner, to be more successful, was not a monster. It was a frightened, traumatized part of his own psyche, shouting for safety in the only way it knew how. He didn't need to silence that voice with force. He needed to be the parent that his inner child never had. He needed to show that wounded part of himself that it was safe to stop running, that it was safe to stop performing, and that it was safe to be exactly as he was. This is the great turning point of the journey. It is the moment you realize that the heartbreak you have been trying to avoid is actually the gate. The pain is not a mistake, it is the friction that wakes you up. When you stop running from the discomfort, you stop being a prisoner of the need to be someone else. You begin the slow, radical process of becoming who you actually are. You are not the actor on the stage, terrified of forgetting your lines. You are not the script that was written for you by others. You are the space in which the performance occurs. And in that space, there is room for everything: joy, the grief, the ambition, and the vulnerability. You don't have to be perfect to be whole. You just have to be willing to witness your own life with the same compassion you would offer a friend who is hurting. The monk's journey began when he stopped trying to be the hero of the story and started being the witness to his own existence. And that, as you will see, is where the true work begins. Chapter 5. Hitting the bottom, the foundation of truth. We often view hitting bottom as the ultimate failure, the moment when the architecture of our life collapses under its own weight. We fear this moment above all else, spending countless hours and immense energy trying to shore up the walls of our reputation, our habits, and our self-concept. Yet, the story of the monk, and indeed, the story of so many who have found their way to genuine freedom, suggests that hitting bottom is not a death, but a necessary excavation. When everything you have built to keep yourself safe finally gives way, you are left with something you haven't seen in years: the ground itself. The monk, standing in the rain after fleeing his retreat, was in the most vulnerable position of his life. He had no career to hide behind, no party to distract him, and, for that moment, no monastery to institutionalize his suffering. He was simply a human being, cold and shivering, confronted by the total failure of his escape plan. In that raw, unprotected state, the narrative self, that mental character he had been playing, could no longer sustain itself. He wasn't the successful actor or the disciplined monk. He was just a consciousness observing a trembling body. This is the alchemy of the bottom. When you lose the ability to pretend, you gain the ability to see. You may be experiencing your own version of this. It might not be a dramatic collapse of your entire life. It might be the quiet, nagging realization that your daily routine is no longer fulfilling, or the sudden, sharp awareness that you are exhausted by the effort of being someone. You have been trying to solve your inner problems with outside solutions, and the math has finally stopped adding up. Instead of dreading this feeling, consider it a breakthrough. The fact that you can no longer comfortably sustain your old patterns is not a sign that you are failing at life. It is a sign that you are outgrowing the cage. The discomfort is a signal that your awareness is expanding beyond the narrow confines of your current identity. When the monk returned to the retreat center, he did something radical. He gave up the war. He stopped trying to fix his depression. He stopped trying to achieve a peaceful mind. He sat down on the cushion, and for the first time, he opened the door to whatever was actually present. If there was anger, he invited it in. If there was shame, he sat with it. If there was panic, he let it swirl around the room without trying to catch it. He discovered the secret of the sky and the clouds. He realized that his awareness was like the vast, unchanging expanse of the atmosphere. The thoughts, emotions, and memories that had been tormenting him were merely weather patterns. They were real. Yes, they brought rain and wind and cold, but they were not the sky itself. They were temporary, passing phenomena occurring within the space of his own existence. This is not a concept for you to memorize. It is a reality for you to experience. You are not your thoughts. When you feel a wave of anxiety, you are not the anxiety. You are the space in which the anxiety is being felt. When you feel a sense of failure, you are not the failure. You are the witness of that judgment. This realization is the foundation of the architecture of stillness. It means that you can live in the middle of a stressful, demanding life and still maintain a core of stability. It means that you do not need to wait for your external circumstances to become perfect before you allow yourself to feel okay. The monk's path forward was not about getting rid of the clouds. It was about realizing that he was the sky. By shifting his identification from the weather to the space, he fundamentally altered his relationship with his suffering. He no longer needed to escape the panic attack. He could observe it, breathe through it, and watch as it eventually spent its energy and moved on. As you move through your own day, experiment with this shift in perspective. When you feel the familiar tension of the browser tabs opening, the worry, the self-judgment, the frantic need for more pause, don't try to stop the thoughts. Don't try to fix them. Simply step back into the role of the witness. Become the sky. Watch the weather pattern of your own mind with curiosity and kindness. Notice how it feels to be the one who is observing the tension, rather than being consumed by it. You are laying the foundation of a life that is no longer held hostage by the weather of the mind. You are finding the ground beneath the collapse, and from this ground you can finally begin to build something that is authentic, durable, and truly yours. Chapter 6. The Myth of the Empty Mind. For most of his adult life, the monk had approached meditation with the same aggressive ambition he had applied to his career in London and New York. He assumed that meditation was a battle of endurance, a process of forcefully sweeping the mind clean until it reached a state of pristine blank perfection. He would sit down with grim determination, grit his teeth, and try to command his thoughts to stop. And what happened? The thoughts grew louder. The more he tried to suppress them, the more aggressively they fought back. He was essentially trying to stop a moving train by standing in front of it and holding up his hands. This is the great misunderstanding of modern mindfulness. We are sold the idea that a peaceful mind is an empty mind. But an empty mind is not only impossible, it completely misses the point of the practice. The brain is an organ designed to secrete thoughts, just as the stomach is designed to secrete enzymes. You cannot turn it off without dying. Meditation is not about eliminating the clouds, it is about learning to be the sky. It is about changing your relationship to the noise. Here is how the architecture of awareness is actually built in practice. You sit down and you choose a point of focus. It might be the sensation of your breath entering and leaving your nostrils, or the rise and fall of your chest. You place your attention there. For a few seconds you are present. Then, inevitably, the mind will wander. It will draft an email you need to send tomorrow. It will replay an embarrassing conversation from 3 years ago. It will worry about a strange noise in the house. It will do what minds do. Most people reach this point, realize their mind has wandered, and immediately conclude, I am failing at this. I'm terrible at meditation. They feel surge of frustration, judge themselves, and often abandon the practice altogether. But here is the secret that changes everything. That moment when you realize your mind has wandered is not a failure. It is the moment you wake up. It is the victory. The fact that you noticed you were distracted means that your awareness just stepped outside of the distraction. You just remembered that you are the sky. In that precise second, you have a choice. You can follow the thought down the rabbit hole, or you can gently, without an ounce of self-criticism, return your attention to the breath. Focus, notice the wandering. Return over and over again. You are not trying to prevent the wandering. The thoughts that distract you are not obstacles. They are the very weights you are lifting to strengthen the muscle of your awareness. Without the wandering, there would be no opportunity to practice returning. As you do this, you begin to cultivate the inner witness part of you that is aware of the thinking. The next time you are caught in a spiral of anxiety at your desk, you can try a profound experiment. Stop for a moment and ask yourself, who is aware of this anxiety right now? Do not try to answer this question intellectually. Just pose the question and rest in the space that follows it. You will find that the awareness observing the anxiety is not, itself, anxious. It is perfectly calm. It is spacious, stable, and completely untouched by the emotional storm it is watching. This is the sanctuary you have been searching for. It is not a place you travel to. It is a dimension of your own consciousness that is available to you in any room, in any traffic jam, in any hospital waiting room. You do not need a silent monastery to access it. You only need to notice the thought, release the thought, and return to the ground of your being. Chapter 7. The Geography of Self-Compassion. As the monk sat in his isolation watching the weather patterns of his mind, he made a second, equally revolutionary discovery. You cannot hate yourself into becoming someone you love. For decades, he had believed that harsh self-criticism was the engine of his progress. He thought that if he was just hard enough on himself, if he verbally abused himself every time he made a mistake, he would eventually reach a standard of perfection that would make him worthy of peace. He believed his inner critic was a wise, demanding coach. But as he observed this voice from the vantage point of the witness, he saw the truth. The harshest critic inside his head was not a wise counselor. It was a terrified fragment of his own psyche. It was a part of him that had learned, very early in life, that the world is dangerous and that the only way to avoid being rejected or harmed by others was to attack himself. First, it was a preemptive strike. When we berate ourselves for not working hard enough, for feeling anxious, or for saying the wrong thing, we are merely repeating a survival mechanism we picked up long ago. We are hoping that if we punish ourselves severely enough, life will spare us its punishments. But self-hatred only breeds more self-hatred. Criticism only breeds more tension. You cannot build a peaceful life on a foundation of internal violence. To transform this, the monk began to practice a radical form of self-hospitality. He started to treat the broken, frightened parts of himself with the same unconditional kindness he would offer to a wounded animal. He realized that the panicked voice in his head did not need to be argued with or suppressed, it needed to be held. When you notice the voice of self-criticism rising, do not fight it. Instead, try placing a physical hand over your heart. The body responds to touch with a release of oxytocin. It is a biological signal of safety. Feel the warmth of your hand. Take a deep breath and speak to that internal critic not as an enemy but as a frightened child. You might say mentally, I see that you are scared right now. I know this is hard, but you are doing the best you can. and you are worthy of love exactly as you are. There is a common fear that arises when people first attempt this. We worry that if we are kind to ourselves, we will become lazy. We fear that without the whip of self-criticism, we will lose our edge, abandon our goals, and sink into apathy. But psychological reality proves the exact opposite. When you spend all your energy attacking yourself, you are draining the very reserves you need for actual growth. You are keeping your nervous system in a constant state of threat, which makes learning, creativity, and resilience almost impossible. When you stop the internal attack, you free up massive amounts of bandwidth. You discover that self-compassion is the true foundation of sustainable transformation. When you can look at your limitations and mistakes with a curious, gentle kindness instead of harsh judgment, you are much more likely to understand what actually needs to change. You stop wasting energy defending your ego, and you start using that energy to repair your life. This is the practice of reparenting yourself. You are stepping in to provide the unconditional acceptance that the actor was desperately trying to win from the audience. You are teaching your own nervous system that it is safe to be flawed, safe to be a beginner, and safe to be human. The next time you fail, the next time you feel you are falling behind, do not reach for the whip. Reach for your own heart. Treat your suffering as a call for compassion, not a call for punishment. It will not magically erase the difficulty of the situation, but it will fundamentally change your capacity to walk through it. You become your own safest harbor, and from that harbor, you can weather any storm the world brings to your door. Chapter 8. The Geography of the Gap. In the landscape of our lives, we often focus exclusively on the peaks of achievement and the valleys of failure. We organize our identity around the milestones we have reached and the crises we have survived. But there is a third, more subtle terrain that holds the secret to genuine freedom. The gap is the tiny, silent space between an event and your response to it. It is the millisecond that exists after the email arrives. But before you tap out a defensive reply, the heartbeat after someone cuts you off in traffic, but before you feel the surge of rage, the pause between a negative thought arising in your mind and your decision to believe it. Most of us live our lives as if the gap does not exist. We are trained to react. We are conditioned to be a mirror that immediately reflects whatever the world throws at us. If the world is angry, we become angry. If the world is rushed, we become rushed. If the world says you aren't enough, we instantly internalize it as a fact. This is the life of the actor, constantly delivering lines based on cues we didn't write. The monk's great liberation began when he realized he could stop being a mirror and start being a filter. He learned that within that tiny gap, he held the keys to his own nervous system. When he was in the monastery, he practiced identifying the gap in real time. If he felt a sudden surge of irritation toward a fellow monk, he would not move to speak. He would freeze. He would physically sense the irritation, the heat in his face, the tightening in his stomach, and he would consciously choose to remain in the gap for one extra breath. He would refuse to give the irritation the permission to speak. In that one breath, he discovered a world of freedom. You can reclaim this territory starting today. You do not need to be a monk to master the gap. You simply need to become an observer of your own internal weather patterns. When you feel a strong emotion, frustration, shame, desire, fear, don't let it immediately spill over into action. Just pause. Physical cues are your best allies here. Your body almost always knows the emotion before your mind has labeled it. When you feel that sudden click of tension, use it as a trigger to stop. Drop your shoulders away from your ears, unclench your jaw. Take one conscious, deep breath into the belly. In that moment of conscious pausing, you are breaking the chain of conditioned reactivity. You are teaching your nervous system that it is not in an emergency. You are moving from the reactive, survival-based mind into the creative, presence-based mind. This is where the architecture of stillness becomes truly transformative. When you master the gap, you stop being a victim of your conditioning. You stop being triggered into patterns of behavior that leave you feeling small, ashamed, or drained. You start to exercise the most fundamental human power, the power of choice. Imagine how your life would change if you could choose your response in even 10% of your difficult moments. Imagine the relationships that would be saved, the conflicts that would be diffused, and the inner peace that would accumulate just from that small shift. The gap is also where your humanity resides. In the gap, you are not defined by your past. You are defined by the possibility of your next action. You are not defined by the devil voice in your head. You are defined by your ability to notice the voice and choose not to obey it. You will fail at this, of course. You will react. You will snap. You will be carried away by the current of your habits. That is not a sign of failure. It is simply the nature of the training. When you catch yourself having reacted, don't waste time on self-flagellation. Just notice it. See the pattern. Smile at the realization that you are awake and resolve to stay in the gap a little longer the next time. This is the training of a lifetime. It is how you turn your life into a work of art, consciously crafted from moment to moment, rather than a frantic performance dictated by old scripts. You are no longer the actor playing a part. You are the director standing in the wings, deciding which scenes to play and which ones to cut. This is the beauty of the gap. It is the point of entry into a life that is truly deeply your own. It is where you find the freedom to be different than you were a moment ago. And it is always, always available. You are standing in the gap right now, between the end of this sentence and the beginning of your next action. How will you use it? Chapter 9. Living as a Verb. We often talk about self-improvement as if we are trying to sculpt a statue. We have this image in our minds of a final version of ourselves that is perfectly calm, perfectly wise, perfectly successful. And we treat our daily life as the labor required to reach that finish line. We think, once I have solved my anxiety, once I have built my life, once I have arrived, then I can stop working. But life is not a noun. Life is not a product. Life is a verb. It is a process that is happening in real time every single second. The monk realized that his search for enlightenment was actually an attempt to reach a state of being where he would no longer have to engage with the messy, unfinished work of living. He wanted to reach the finish line of the race, but he eventually saw that the race was all there was. The running, the stumbling, the breathing, the sweating, that was the experience. The finish line was a mirage. When you start to live as a verb, your entire orientation toward your struggles changes. You stop asking, when will this be over, and start asking, what is this teaching me right now? You stop viewing your life as a series of obstacles to be cleared before you can be happy. You begin to see your life as a series of movements in a dance. Some movements are graceful and some are clumsy. Some are fast and some are slow. But every movement is necessary. Every stumble provides the balance for the next step. Living as a verb means embracing the unfinished nature of your existence. It means giving yourself permission to be a work in progress. You are allowed to be someone who is currently learning how to be present. You are allowed to be someone who is currently learning how to handle their anxiety. You are allowed to be someone who is currently learning how to love. This perspective is the ultimate antidote to the verdict culture we discussed earlier. When you are a verb, you cannot be graded. You are not an output, you are an unfolding. You are like the river, which cannot be judged as a failure because it winds and turns and hits rocks. Its nature is to flow. Your nature is to grow. This is where the architecture of stillness meets the marketplace of life. It is not enough to find peace on a meditation cushion if you cannot carry that peace into the meeting, the argument, or the traffic jam. The true test of your awareness is not how quiet your mind is in the dark, but how steady your heart is in the heat of the day. Living as a verb means that even when the world is chaotic, you remain in motion. You don't freeze. You don't retreat. You continue to engage with your responsibilities, your relationships, and your aspirations. But you do so with a quality of presence that is anchored in the gap. You are a conscious participant in the ongoing creation of your life. And because you are a participant, you can adjust, you can course correct, you can change your mind. You can decide that the old script is no longer serving you and begin to write a new one, line by line, breath by breath. There is a profound humility in living as a verb. It recognizes that we are not the masters of our destiny, but we are the authors of our response. We cannot control the winds of our life, but we can adjust our sails, and the adjustment is the life. The adjustment is the practice. So, how are you living today? Are you living as a product, worried about how you look to others and how you measure up against the standards of the world? Or are you living as a verb, curious about the next step, grateful for the breath, and engaged with the reality of this exact moment. The beauty of the verb is that you can change it at any time. You can choose to move differently. You can choose to breathe more deeply. You can choose to listen more carefully. You can choose to be kind. You are an ever-widening circle, a never-ending song. You are doing exactly what you were meant to do. You are participating, with all your beautiful, messy, unfinished glory, in the ongoing creation of the world. And that is not a project to be finished, that is a life to be lived. Chapter 11. The Art of Not Knowing. We are haunted by the illusion that we must have the answers. We believe that to be a responsible adult, a successful professional, or a grown-up in any capacity, we must possess a map of the future. We carry the burden of needing to know how it all turns out, how the career path will unfold, how the relationship will settle, how the bank account will balance. This demand for certainty is the heavy stone that keeps our minds anchored in a state of chronic, low-grade dread. The monk's most profound realization during his years of isolation was the beauty of not knowing. He had entered the retreat with a desperate need to find a blueprint for his life. He wanted a philosophy that would lock his future into place, a system that would guarantee safety. Instead, the silence taught him the exact opposite, that the only way to be truly alive is to be fundamentally unsure. Not knowing is not ignorance. It is not the absence of intelligence. It is the courageous surrender of the ego's demand for control. It is the admission that the universe is far more vast, more creative, and more unpredictable than your mental models can possibly encompass. When you hold a position of absolute certainty, you become rigid, you become brittle, you become unable to adapt to the shifting terrain of your own life. But when you inhabit a position of not knowing, you become fluid. You become like waterable to flow around the rocks, able to fill the valleys, able to change your shape in response to the changing conditions of the landscape. You can test this in your daily life. The next time you find yourself gripped by an emergency of the mind, the frantic need to know what he meant by that message, or whether that project will succeed, or how you will handle a problem next month, stop and label the thought. This is the need for certainty. Acknowledge the fear behind the need. It is a natural human desire to want to know, to want to feel safe, but then choose to rest in the unknown. Say to yourself, aloud if you need to, I do not know, and that is okay. Feel the expansion that occurs in your chest when you let go of the requirement to predict the future. You are giving yourself permission to just be a participant, rather than a frantic predictor. You are stepping back from the role of the architect of fate and returning to the role of the witness of the now. This practice of not knowing is the gateway to the beginner's mind. It is what allows you to look at a person you have known for 10 years and see them with fresh eyes. It is what allows you to look at a task you have performed 100 times and find a new way to engage with it. It keeps you from becoming stale, from becoming set in your ways, from becoming a collection of reactions masquerading as a human being. The world is constantly changing, and the only way to remain in harmony with it is to change with it. If you are stuck in your certainties, you will be in constant friction with reality. If you are grounded in not knowing, you are in constant flow with reality. There is a deep, quiet power in being able to look at a difficult situation and say, I have no idea how this is going to be resolved, but I trust my ability to meet the moment when it arrives. This is the ultimate form of self-confidence. It is not confidence in your ability to control the future. It is confidence in your ability to be present for whatever arises. As you navigate the rest of your day, look for the moments where the need to know arises. Where is it gripping you the tightest? Where are you trying to force the river to flow in a specific direction because you are afraid of the unknown? Gently, tenderly, open your hands. Release the map, you don't need it. The terrain will reveal itself one step at a time, and your only job, the only job that has ever been required of you, is to be awake for the step you are taking right now. That is enough. That has always been enough. Chapter 12. The Architecture of Boundaries. As the monk deepened his practice, he discovered a paradox. To be truly present for the world, he had to learn how to turn away from it. This is the architecture of boundarious, the structural integrity that allows your inner life to remain a sanctuary rather than a thoroughfare. We often confuse being present with being available. We live in an era of radical accessibility. where the assumption is that if you have a phone, you are an open door. We feel a phantom obligation to respond, to react, and to be on. But if you never close your door, you are no longer a person, you are a resource for others to drain. Boundaries are not walls built out of fear or hostility. They are the skin of the soul. Just as your physical skin keeps your internal organs intact while allowing you to interact with the environment, your personal boundaries keep your internal peace intact while allowing you to engage with the world. The monk struggled with this for years. He believed that a spiritual person was one who was endlessly patient, endlessly giving, and endlessly permeable. He thought that if he set a boundary, he was failing the test of compassion. It was only when he neared the edge of burnout that he realized, you cannot pour from an empty vessel. By failing to protect his own stillness, he had eventually lost the ability to offer anything of genuine value to anyone else. To build your own architecture of boundaries, you must first recognize the leaks in your system. Where are you giving away your energy because you are afraid of being perceived as difficult? Where are you saying yes when your body is clearly signaling no? Look at your daily schedule. Look at your communication habits. Look at the people in your life who treat your time as a commodity rather than a life force. Boundaries start with the simple, courageous act of claiming your own time. You can start by creating sacred gaps in your day periods where you are unreachable, not because you are ignoring anyone, but because you are attending to the most important person in your life, the observer within. This is not selfish. It is the only way to ensure that when you are available, you are actually present. When you are fully rested and centered, your yes has weight. When you are depleted and distracted, your yes is merely a hollow habit. The most difficult boundaries to build are often the internal ones. We have leaky boundaries with our own thoughts. We allow the devil voice to enter the parlor of our minds at any hour of the day. We allow the worries of tomorrow to hijack the peace of today. Start treating your mind with the same hospitality and the same discernment that you would use for your home. You would not let a stranger wander into your living room and start rearranging your furniture. Why do you allow a thought that says you are a failure to wander through your consciousness and rearrange your self-worth? When you notice a toxic thought pattern, set a boundary. Mentally close the door. Say, this is not a useful visitor right now. You do not have to fight the thought, but you do not have to entertain it. You can simply decline the invitation to engage. This is the architecture of stillness in action. It is the practice of protecting the quiet so that the quiet can protect you. As you begin to define your boundaries, you will likely encounter resistance from others, and certainly from your own conditioned habits. People may be used to you being always on. They may find your newfound focus to be a departure from their expectations. Let them be surprised. You are not responsible for their reaction to your health. You are responsible for the integrity of your own life. Every time you hold a boundary, you are signaling to yourself that you are worthy of protection. You are signaling that your peace is not a negotiable asset. You will find that as your boundaries solidify, your presence becomes deeper. You stop spraying your energy in all directions and start focusing it like a laser. You become more efficient, more creative, and more authentically kind because you are no longer operating from a place of chronic exhaustion. Boundaries are the ultimate form of self-love. They are the proof that you take your own existence seriously. By protecting your stillness, you ensure that you have a sanctuary to which you can always return. And from the safety of that sanctuary, you can move out into the world with a strength, a clarity, and a heart that is truly deeply your own. Chapter 13. The Alchemy of Grief. We often treat grief as a visitor who has stayed too long, a guest we wish would pack their bags so we could return to the normal business of living. We associate it with loss, the death of a loved one, the end of a relationship, the closing of a chapter. But in the architecture of the inner life, grief is something far more profound. It is the price we pay for being awake and the crucible in which our empathy is forged. The monk, during his 4 years of silence, encountered grief not as a singular event, but as a constant, rhythmic pulse. He grieved for the years he had wasted running away from himself. He grieved for the innocence of his childhood that was stripped away by trauma. He grieved for the man he might have been if he had chosen to be honest with himself a decade sooner. At first, he tried to process this grief. He tried to turn it into a story he could study. But grief is not a logic problem to be solved. It is an energy to be held. If you try to outrun your grief, it will grow legs and chase you across the landscape of your life. It will show up in your irritability, your sudden bouts of exhaustion, your inability to connect with the people right in front of you. You cannot fix grief. You can only allow it to pass through you, like a river through a canyon. The alchemy of grief lies in its ability to soften the ego. When you are grieving, you are fundamentally undone. Your defenses are down. The carefully constructed persona you present to the world, the one that says, "I have it all together," has been cracked open. This is exactly why grief is so terrifying to the ego, and also why it is so transformative in that cracked open space. You are finally porous enough for real transformation to happen. You can no longer rely on the old scripts of who you are, because those scripts feel small and brittle in the face of deep sorrow. You are forced to rely on something deeper. You are forced to rest in the witness. When you feel the wave of grief rising, and it will rise, often at the most inconvenient times, do not look away. Do not reach for the phone to distract yourself. Do not judge yourself for feeling weak. Sit with it. Breathe into the center of the chest where the ache lives. Notice the physical sensation of the sorrow. Is it heavy? Is it cold? Is it tight? Allow the feeling to exist without needing it to change. You are not doing anything wrong. You are simply witnessing the depth of your own capacity to care. There is a profound dignity in sitting with your own sorrow. It is the ultimate act of self-honesty. By allowing yourself to grieve, you are honoring the reality of your experience. You are saying, "This mattered," and in that acknowledgement there is a strange, quiet release. Grief is the other side of love. The depth of your sorrow is a direct measure of the depth of your capacity to attach, to value, and to feel. If you are grieving, it means you have been fully alive. It means you have risked something. It means you have participated in the world. As you walk through the world, you will find that your grief changes your eyes. You will see the suffering of others with a new, sharper clarity. You will see the fragility of the people in the grocery store, the hidden burdens behind the smiles of your colleagues. Your own sorrow becomes a bridge to the sorrow of others. It dissolves the illusion of separation. You realize that everyone is, in some way, walking through the same rain. Don't be afraid to let your heart be broken. A heart that has never been broken is a heart that has never truly opened. A heart that is shattered is a heart that has finally become wide enough to hold the reality of the human experience. This is the alchemy. You take the lead of your sorrow, and you turn it into the gold of compassion. You take the weight of your loss, and you turn it into the wings of your empathy. You become a person who can hold the pain of the world, not because you are unaffected by it, but because you have learned how to hold your own pain with such tenderness that you now know how to hold the pain of others. The grief will not go away, but it will change. It will become a part of your landscape, a quiet, ancient mountain in the distance that gives your horizon scale and beauty. It will serve as a constant reminder that you are a participant in the profound, fleeting, precious work of being human, and that in itself is enough. Chapter 14. The geometry of conflict dancing with the shadow. We spend an enormous amount of energy in our lives trying to curate a peaceful environment. We avoid difficult conversations. We walk on eggshells around volatile personalities. And we carefully edit our opinions to ensure we remain within the safe harbor of social consensus. We think that peace is the absence of friction. But the monk discovered, after years of silence, that true peace is not the absence of conflict, is the capacity to hold conflict without being colonized by it. Conflict is the fire of human interaction. It is the friction that creates the light of understanding. Provided we know how to hold the torch without burning our own hands. The shadow is the name we give to the parts of ourselves we have deemed unacceptable: our anger, our jealousy, our ambition, our pettiness. Because we find these traits distasteful, we push them into the basement of our psyche. But the shadow does not disappear. It simply gathers strength in the dark. It eventually begins to leak out, projecting itself onto others. We see our own buried anger in the aggressive behavior of a colleague. We see our own hidden greed in the ruthless actions of a competitor. The monk's breakthrough came when he realized that every time he felt a spike of judgment towards someone else, He was actually receiving a map to his own shadow. Instead of attacking the villain in his life, he began to turn the gaze inward. What is it in me that is being triggered by this person? This is the alchemy of conflict, turning the gaze from the them to the me. When you find yourself in the grip of conflict, notice the actor who wants to defend, justify, and win. Notice the desperation of that persona. It is terrified of being wrong because it believes its existence depends on being right. But you, the witness, are not under threat. You can afford to be curious. Try this. The next time you are in the middle of a heated argument, intentionally shift your focus into the body. Feel the heat of the emotion. Notice the urge to interrupt, the urge to win, the urge to prove the other person bad. Do not act on these urges. Simply sit with them. You are observing the shadow, not feeding it. By holding the conflict in the space of your awareness, you fundamentally change the dynamic. You stop being a combatant in a war of wills, and you become a container for the friction. You might be surprised to find that when you stop resisting the conflict, the other person often loses their own momentum. When you are no longer playing the part of the defender, the aggressor often has nowhere to land. Dancing with your shadow means acknowledging that you are capable of the same traits you find so repulsive in others. You are not above the petty, the greedy, or the angry. You are human, and the entire spectrum of human experience resides within you. The difference between you and the person you judge is merely the degree to which you have integrated that knowledge. The monk learned that to make peace with the world, he first had to make peace with his own darkness. He learned to thank the people who triggered him, for they were the ones who finally held up the mirror he needed to see his own disowned parts. This is not about becoming a doormat. It is about becoming an immovable object that doesn't need to strike back. You can set firm boundaries and speak your truth, but you can do so without the poison of malice. You can be fierce without being vengeful. You can be clear without being cruel. When you integrate the shadow, you lose the need to project your fears onto the world. You stop needing to win, because you are no longer fighting for the validation of your own ego. You start to see that conflict is just another form of weather, a loud, turbulent, uncomfortable storm that is passing through the vast sky of your existence. You can stand in the middle of that storm and remain dry. You can hold your ground, breathe through the friction, and come out the other side with your integrity intact and your heart still open. That is the dance. That is the architecture of a person who is no longer living in the shadow of their own projections, but in the light of their own integrated truth. Chapter 15. The Anatomy of Resilience, Finding the Bending Point. We are often told that resilience is the ability to be like a stone, unmoving, impenetrable, and impervious to the hits we take in life. We admire those who seem to absorb blow after blow without ever showing a crack. But stone is ultimately brittle. When the force of the impact becomes too great, it doesn't bend, it shatters. The monk's time in the wilderness taught him that true resilience is not the strength of the stone. It is the resilience of the bamboo. It is the ability to bend, to sway, to yield to the wind without breaking. The bamboo survives the storm precisely because it knows how to bow. Resilience is not the absence of impact, it is the quality of your recovery. The monk realized that he had spent his entire life trying to be a stone. He had built defenses that were meant to be unshakable. But in the face of his heart condition and his internal collapse, those defenses had left him paralyzed. He had been so rigid in his efforts to control his environment that when the environment finally overwhelmed him, he had nothing but his own terror. To build the resilience of the bamboo, you must learn to soften into the hit. When life brings you a sudden, unwanted change, a job loss, a grief, a betrayal, the instinctual reaction is to harden. We tense our muscles, we brace our minds, and we fight to keep the world exactly as it was. But that bracing is exactly what snaps the bone. Instead, notice the moment of impact. Feel the hit in your body, the sudden surge of adrenaline, the shock, the contraction. Instead of fighting that contraction, invite it. Breathe into the very point of the tension. Allow yourself to feel the full, raw weight of the difficulty. By acknowledging the pain immediately, you prevent it from calcifying into bitterness. You prevent it from becoming a permanent structural flaw in your character. The monk's practice was to say to every difficulty, "This is happening and I am here to witness it." He didn't ask why. Because why is a question that leads to a labyrinth of regret and victimhood, he asked. What is this? This is the anatomy of recovery. You acknowledge the event, you feel the emotion, and then crucially, you release the need for it to be different than it is. You bow. Resilience is also a matter of pacing. The stone tries to take the whole force of the storm at once. The bamboo takes the storm one gust at a time. When you are in the middle of a crisis, do not try to solve the next 5 years. Do not try to carry the weight of the entire catastrophe on your shoulders. Solve the next 10 minutes. Find the next breath. Drink the next glass of water. This is not giving up, this is tactical survival. It is the wisdom of the process. By breaking the mountain into pebbles, you make the impossible manageable. You will find that as you cultivate this flexibility, you stop fearing the hit. You recognize that you have the capacity to go down, and more importantly, the capacity to come back up. You begin to trust your own recovery. This trust is the ultimate form of resilience. It is the knowledge that even if the wind blows hard enough to push you to the ground, your roots are deep enough to hold, and your nature is flexible enough to rise again. The next time the wind of change begins to howl, don't brace yourself. Don't try to be a monument, be the bamboo. Let yourself sway, let yourself feel the discomfort, and trust that once the gust passes, you will still be Theranos quite the same. Perhaps a little more weathered, but grounded, present, and ready for whatever the next moment brings. You are not a statue, you are a living, breathing, bending participant in the world. And that is your true strength. Chapter 16. The Architecture of Intention, Crafting Your Focus. We have spent much of this journey dismantling the structures that do not serve you. But now we must address what you build in their place. If you clear the weeds from a garden but do not plant anything, the weeds will simply return. In the architecture of the inner life, the weeds are the conditioned, reactive patterns. The garden is the life you choose to cultivate through the power of intention. Intention is not the same as a goal. A goal is a target on a map, a specific outcome in the future that you are trying to reach. An intention is the direction of your compass, a quality of presence you bring to every step of the journey, regardless of the destination. The monk discovered that he could set an intention for his day that functioned as a lighthouse. He would sit in the morning silence, not to blank his mind, but to align his heart. He would ask, "How do I want to move through the world today?" Perhaps his intention was kindness, or clarity, or patience. When you set an intention, you are preloading your nervous system with a map. You are telling your brain what to look for. If your intention is patience, you are far more likely to notice the gap when you are sitting in traffic. You are far more likely to feel the tension rising and choose to breathe instead of react. The intention acts as a silent background process that monitors your behavior. Most of us move through the day in a state of reactive drift. We wake up, we check our screens, and we immediately become passengers in the currents of other people's needs and other people's emergencies. We drift from one reaction to the next. By setting an intention, you move from being a passenger to being a pilot. You can set an intention for anything, for a meeting, for a conversation, for a period of work, or even for the act of walking to the grocery store. Try this. Before you enter your next high-stress situation, a difficult conversation with a partner, or a deadline-heavy meeting, take 30 seconds to close your eyes. Visualize how you want to be. Do not focus on the outcome. You cannot control the outcome. Focus on the quality of your presence. I will be a steady, calm, and listening presence. That is your intention. When the situation begins to heat up, the intention will act as an anchor. When you feel the familiar urge to become defensive or rushed, the intention will pulse in the back of your mind like a reminder. It will give you the strength to return to the gap. This is the alchemy of focus. You are training your attention to inhabit the qualities you value most. You are proving to yourself that your internal state is not dictated by the world, but is a creative act you perform every day. You will forget your intentions. You will get swept away. That is not a failure, it is the human condition. The moment you remember your intention, that is the moment you return to the pilot's seat. It doesn't matter how many times you drift. It matters how many times you decide to align. Intention is the bridge between the architecture of stillness and the reality of the marketplace. It allows you to be in the world but not of it. You are fully engaged, fully responsible, and fully active. but you are rooted in a purpose that is deeper than the success or failure of your tasks. As you craft your focus, be kind to yourself. Do not set intentions that are perfectionistic. Set intentions that are human-sized. Set intentions that bring you closer to the person you are actually becoming. You are the architect of your focus. Every time you set an intention, you are reinforcing the structure of your own character. You are moving from the drift of a reactive life to the deliberate, meaningful flow of a conscious one. And in that flow, you will find a satisfaction that no achievement could ever provide. Chapter 17. The Radical Act of Listening. In a world that screams for attention, the most revolutionary thing you can do is listen. And yet, listening is a dying art. We have become a culture of waiting to speak. We listen to others only long enough to formulate our rebuttal, our advice, or our own competing story. We are not listening to understand, we are listening to position ourselves. The monk, during his silence, learned that listening is not a passive act. It is a form of deep, active presence. When he finally returned to the world, he realized he could hear things that others missed, not just the words, but the vibration of the person speaking. He could hear the insecurity masked by arrogance, the sadness masked by anger, the plea for connection masked by demands. To listen radically, you must first create a vacuum of silence within yourself. You have to be willing to set aside your own agenda, your own defense mechanisms, and your own desire to be the expert in the conversation. You have to be willing to be empty, so that the other person can fill the space with their truth. When you are listening to someone, try to notice the actor inside you, the part of you that is mentally writing your response while they are still speaking. Gently, consciously, set that actor aside. Return your focus to the sound of their voice, the cadence of their breath, and the vulnerability in their eyes. This level of listening is a gift. It is one of the highest forms of love you can offer another human being. When you listen to someone without the intent to fix them, interrupt them, or judge them, you provide them with a sanctuary. You allow them to feel heard, and being truly heard is often the catalyst for the very healing they were struggling to find. But listening to others is only half of the architecture. The other half is listening to yourself. We spend so much time telling ourselves stories about who we are and what we need that we have forgotten how to hear the still, small voice of our own intuition. This voice doesn't arrive as a loud command. It arrives as a nudge, a sensation, a quiet pull toward or away from something. It is the wisdom of your nervous system, the integration of your experiences, and the truth of your being. To hear it, you must practice radical listening in your own life. Stop the internal commentary for a moment. Stop the analysis. Stop the debate. Ask yourself a question. What do I really need right now? And then wait. Don't immediately answer with the smart thing or the responsible thing. Just listen to the silence that follows the question. The answer may be surprising. It may be inconvenient. It may contradict the plan you have so carefully laid out, but it will be honest. When you listen deeply to yourself, you stop living against the grain of your own soul. You stop forcing yourself into boxes that don't fit. You start to align your actions with your internal reality. This is the foundation of authenticity. You are building a life based on resonance rather than effort. When you listen to others with presence, and to yourself with curiosity, you stop moving through the world like a battering ram and start moving through it like a river. You start to find the path of least resistance, not because you are lazy, but because you are finally in tune with the terrain of your own truth. The next time you are in a conversation, challenge yourself to be the last one to speak. Let the silence hang for a moment after they finish. Let their words settle. You will be amazed at what emerges in that extra space. You will hear not just what they said, but what they meant. And in that deeper understanding, you will find a connection that is far more durable than any agreement you could have engineered. Listening is the bridge between two separate islands of consciousness. It is the act that proves we are not alone. And it begins with the humble, radical choice to be quiet, to be present, and to hear. Chapter 18. The Architecture of Forgiveness, Liberating the Past. Forgiveness is, perhaps, the most misunderstood concept in the human experience. We often think it means condoning the behavior of those who have hurt us, or that it is a gift we grant to someone else to absolve them of their sins. We withhold it as a form of currency, waiting for the other party to apologize or change before we release our grip on the resentment. But the monk's journey through the landscape of his own trauma revealed a harsher reality. Forgiveness is not a gift you give to someone else. It is an act of surgical extraction you perform on yourself. When you hold on to resentment, you are drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. You are carrying the weight of the past into every room you enter, allowing a ghost from a previous chapter to dictate the quality of your present-day relationships. Resentment is a form of psychic clutter, a tab in your browser that never closes, consistently draining your battery and slowing down your system. Forgiveness is the act of deleting the file. It is the recognition that the past is a finished story, and that keeping it alive in your memory does not change what happened. It only ensures that the injury continues to occur in the present. To forgive is not to say that what happened was okay. It is to say, I am no longer willing to allow this event to define my future. It is the act of reclaiming the energy you have been wasting on hatred, regret, or the desire for revenge, and reinvesting it in your own growth. The monk's process of forgiveness was a daily practice of release. Whenever the memory of a betrayal or an injustice rose to the surface, he didn't feed it with rumination. He acknowledged the injury, he felt the sting of it. He honored the hurt, and then he consciously chose to drop it. He visualized the memory as a heavy stone he had been carrying, and he simply opened his hand. You can begin this practice by identifying the unpaid debts you are still carrying. Are you waiting for an apology that will never come? Are you waiting for someone to acknowledge the pain they caused you? When you tie your freedom to the behavior of someone else, you are making yourself a prisoner of their limitations. Forgiveness is the ultimate boundary. It is the statement that you have extracted all the learning you can from the experience, and you are now finished with it. You are cutting the cord if you struggle to forgive. Start with the most difficult person, yourself. We often harbor more resentment toward our own past selves for the mistakes we made, the opportunities we squandered, the times we were weak than we do toward any external enemy. We treat our past self as if they were a stranger who betrayed us. But your past self was doing the best they could with the information and the tools they had at the time. They were operating from a place of fear or ignorance or pain, just as you are now. When you forgive your past self, you are finally integrating the fragmented pieces of your history. You are becoming a whole person again, rather than a person haunted by the ghosts of their own previous iterations. This is the alchemy of release. When you forgive, the landscape of your mind suddenly becomes much more spacious. The energy that was tied up in the defensive crouch of resentment is suddenly free. You have more capacity for joy, more bandwidth for presence, and more courage to engage with the world as it is, rather than as you fear it might become. Forgiveness is not an on-time event, it is a discipline. It is a muscle that strengthens with every act of letting go. Every time you refuse to be drawn into the narrative of your own grievance, you are exercising your freedom. You are choosing to be a person who is defined by their future potential, not their past injuries. You are walking out of the prison of your own mind, and you are finally free to begin the rest of your life. Chapter 19. The Architecture of Joy, the Practice of Gratitude. We are conditioned to believe that joy is a prize, something we stumble upon when the stars align, when the promotion arrives, or when the perfect partner appears. We treat joy as an external phenomenon, something that happens to us. But the monk discovered that joy is not an event, it is a discipline of attention. In the midst of his retreat, facing the stark, barren landscape of his own mind, the monk realized that joy was the only thing that could break the cycle of his own self-hatred. It wasn't that his circumstances changed, the isolation was still harsh, the memories still painful, but he began to notice that joy was always present in the periphery, waiting for an invitation. Gratitude is the invitation. We often make the mistake of thinking that we should be grateful after we have received something good. But this is backward. Our gratitude is not a response to a positive outcome, it is a lens through which you view reality. When you practice gratitude, you are actively training your brain to scan for the beauty, the grace, and the small, quiet miracles that exist in every single moment. This is the geometry of joy. It exists in the space between the expectation and the reality. When you expect nothing, everything you receive becomes a gift. When you expect everything, everything feels like a disappointment. To cultivate the architecture of joy, you must start with the micro-gratitudes. Stop looking for the epic. Look for the way the morning light catches the dust in the air. Look for the way your body breathes without you having to ask it to. Look for the kindness of the barista, the reliability of the floor beneath your feet, the simple fact that you have the capacity to read these words. This is not a form of toxic positivity. It is not about ignoring the difficulties of your life or papering over your pain with empty platitudes. It is about holding the reality of your suffering alongside the reality of your blessings. You can be in pain and still be grateful for the sunset. You can be grieving and still appreciate the taste of water. This dual awareness is the hallmark of a mature, integrated soul. The practice is simple. Every night before you close your eyes, anchor your awareness in 3 things that occurred during the day that you are thankful for. Not the big things, promotion, the vacation, but the small, transient, easily missed things, the smell of rain, the sound of a laugh, the feeling of safety in your own bed. By doing this, you are teaching your nervous system to prioritize the positive. You are effectively rewiring your brain to see the abundance that is already present in your life. You are shifting your internal baseline from a state of deficit to a state of sufficiency. Joy is the natural state of a consciousness that is no longer preoccupied with the need to be more. When you realize that you are already enough, and that the world is already filled with enough, joy ceases to be a luxury and becomes your baseline. This joy is not the manic, high-energy excitement that burns out quickly. It is a quiet, steady, sturdy presence. It is the joy of being. It is the joy of participating. It is the joy of knowing that, no matter what happens, you have the capacity to find something beautiful in the wreckage. As you cultivate this gratitude, you will find that the world begins to change around you. You stop seeing a world that is doing things to you, and you start seeing a world that is inviting you in. You stop being a consumer of experiences and start being a co-creator of beauty. And that, in itself, is a life well lived. You are no longer chasing the sunshine, you are becoming the light. Chapter 20. The Architecture of Service, the Return to the Marketplace. For years, the monk lived in the sanctuary of his retreat, honing his awareness, dissolving his attachments, and mastering the architecture of his own mind. He had traveled as far as a person could go into the interior landscape. Yet he eventually realized that the final test of his freedom was not how well he could sit in silence, but how well he could return to the noise. There is a tradition in many wisdom paths called the return to the marketplace. It is the realization that wisdom serves no purpose if it is kept in a vacuum. The point of your practice, the meditation, the self-compassion, the boundaries, the forgiveness is not to make you a better person in isolation. It is to make you a more capable, more present, and more effective participant in the collective life of humanity. Service is the natural byproduct of an awakened mind. When you stop being consumed by the devil voice in your head, when you stop being a prisoner of your own insecurities and your own endless hunger for more, you naturally become aware of the needs of others. The energy you once spent on the theater of your own ego becomes available to the world. Service does not have to mean a grand, heroic sacrifice. It does not mean you have to quit your job, sell your belongings, or become a saint. Service is found in the way you interact with the person sitting across from you. It is found in the quality of your attention. When you show up to a meeting as a fully present human being, having done the work to center yourself, having practiced the art of radical listening, and having cultivated the patience of the gap, you are performing an act of service. You are introducing a quality of calm into a chaotic environment. You are becoming a stabilizing presence for those around you. The monk realized that the most powerful thing he could offer the world was not a set of instructions, but an example of what it looked like to be home. People are hungry for presence in a world of fragmented, distracted, anxious individuals. A person who is truly, deeply, and unconditionally here is a beacon. To serve is to offer your presence as a refuge. When you are listening to someone, you are saying, "I am here," and you are not alone. When you handle a conflict with integrity and grace, you are saying, "There is a different way to be in the world." When you act with kindness, you are saying, "You are seen and you are valued." You are a cell in the larger body of humanity. When you heal your own suffering, you are literally lowering the aggregate amount of pain in the system. When you practice presence, you are making it easier for others to be present. You are part of an invisible, silent network of people who are choosing awareness over unconsciousness and kindness over violence. The architecture of your life is not a private matter. It is a social one. Every internal choice you make creates an external ripple. Every time you choose to breathe in the gap, you are changing the atmosphere of the room you are in. Every time you choose compassion over judgment, you are shifting the culture of your workplace, your family, and your community. As you integrate this into your daily life, do not overthink your contribution. You do not need to calculate your impact. Just show up. Bring your whole, messy, beautiful, awakened self to the table. Offer your listening, offer your patience, offer your integrity. The monk eventually returned to the world not as a teacher, but as a student of the marketplace. He worked, he struggled, he engaged, and he failed just like everyone else. But he did so with a heart that had found its rest. He had discovered that the refuge he was looking for was not a place, but a way of being that was expansive enough to hold the beauty and the suffering of the world and still remain at peace. You are not arriving at a finish line. You are arriving at the beginning of your life as a contributor. You are finally ready to take the wisdom you have found in the silence and translate it into the language of action. You are ready to be the presence that the world is so desperately waiting for. You are ready to serve. Chapter 21. The architecture of legacy being the sky for others. As you walk through the marketplace of your own life, you may begin to wonder, what remains? If we are all just weather patterns moving through the vast, empty sky of consciousness, what are we actually building? What is the legacy of a person who has stopped striving for the temporary more? The monk's final lesson, the one that truly closed the circle, was the realization that the greatest legacy is not what you leave behind, but what you are while you are here. Legacy is not a monument. It is the quality of your resonance. Every interaction you have, every choice you make to be kind when it would be easier to be indifferent, every time you hold space for someone who is struggling, these are the vibrations you leave in the world. You are building an architecture of impact that exists not in stone, but in the hearts and nervous systems of everyone you encounter. When you have done the work of coming home to yourself, your presence becomes a silent permission slip for others to do the same. By being a person who can sit with their own discomfort, you teach others that it is safe to be human. By being a person who listens without judgment, you teach others that they are worthy of being heard. By being a person who forgives, you teach others that the chain of resentment can be broken. You are the sky for those around you. When the people in your life are caught in the thunderstorms of their own ego, their own anxiety, and their own search for more, you can be the vast, spacious, calm environment that contains their weather. You do not need to fix them. You do not need to change them. You only need to remain present and steady. This is the most powerful form of service. You are not imposing your wisdom. You are embodying it. You are showing that peace is possible, even in the middle of the mess. And that, more than any lecture or advice, is what actually changes the world. As you look forward to the rest of your life, let go of the need to calculate your legacy. Let go of the need to leave a mark that is visible to the masses. The most meaningful marks are the ones that are invisible. The gentle shift in a child's confidence, the healing of a broken relationship, the steadying of a friend's heart in a moment of crisis. You are building a legacy of awareness. Every moment you spend awake is a victory against the unconscious drift of the modern world. Every moment you spend choosing presence is a contribution to the sanity of the whole. You are already whole. You are already free. And the work of your life is simply to live from that truth, one breath at a time. The monastery was a place of preparation, but the world is the place of practice. The silence was the teacher, but the noise is the test. So go back to your desk, back to your relationships, back to your daily tasks, but do not go back the same. Go back as the witness, go back as the sky, go back as the person who knows that, no matter what happens, no matter what storms arise in the foreground of your experience, the vast, luminous space of your own consciousness remains untouched, unshakable, and eternally at home. The journey you began when you opened this book, is not a journey to a destination. It is a journey of homecoming. You have been everywhere, searching for what was already yours. You have been everything, trying to become what you already are. Now, you can finally stop. You can sit down, take a deep, full breath, and recognize that everything you have been looking for, the peace, the wholeness, the freedom, has been here, in the quiet, spacious, and eternal present, waiting for you to come home. Welcome back. Welcome to the life you were always meant to live. Welcome to yourself. Epilogue: the architecture of the horizon. You have reached the final pages, yet there is no conclusion. There is no final period that closes the book on who you are. This is the beauty of the architecture we have explored. It is a structure designed to be open to the sky. If you feel a sense of lightness, that is the weight of the actor persona finally being set down. If you feel a flicker of fear, that is simply the ego realizing that it is no longer in control. Both are natural, both are valid. You are in the process of becoming the author of your own experience, and that is a craft that unfolds until your very last breath. The monk did not leave behind a set of commandments. He left behind a way of being. He did not ask his students to follow him. He asked them to follow the trail of their own breath, to navigate the geography of their own hearts, and to find the ground beneath their own feet. As you close this book, you are not leaving the monastery. You are taking it with you. You are carrying the silence into the city. You are carrying the sanctuary into the boardrooms, the living rooms, and the quiet, lonely moments of the night. You are the architecture of your own peace. Do not worry if you forget. Do not worry if you fall back into the old patterns of the browser tabs and the frantic search for more. The beauty of this path is that it is infinitely forgiving. Every time you realize you have wandered is a new beginning. Every time you return to the breath is a coronation of your own awareness. You have everything you need. You have the gap, where you can choose. You have the witness, who is never broken. You have the compassion, which is the fuel for your journey. You have the mundane, which is the laboratory for your awakening. The horizon is not a line you reach, it is a direction you walk. Keep walking, keep breathing, keep being the sky. The story is yours now. The script is blank, the stage is set, and for the first time in your life, you are not performing for anyone else. You are simply living, truly and deeply, in the quiet, spacious, and eternal reality of now. Go forth and inhabit your life.